Hello, everyone. Very excited to introduce to you Michael Argast from Kobalt Security, a cybersecurity services company here in Vancouver. We're talking to Michael about all things cybersecurity today, and particularly how the world of cybersecurity has changed with COVID-19. Michael, to kick things off today,
Yep.
tell me, all these people are working from home. And I've heard, I've read, I'm hearing that there are, greater concerns around cybersecurity. There's greater risks. What are you seeing in the world today?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things to note. One is, obviously organizations have got greater concerns and risks, but we're actually seeing an increase in the number of attacks. And there's a number of reasons behind that. One of the things to know is whenever there is a significant event in the world, criminals will take advantage of that event, right? So in the case of COVID, people are doing a lot of searching, they're doing a lot of information gathering, and criminals know this, and they will find ways to poison that so that they can find entryways into organizations. But the other thing that's really relevant is when I'm working in the office and I get a suspicious email or I get a request from the CEO to transfer money to an account, I can walk over and talk to my IT person or the CEO directly and validate that. And cyber criminals know that we're no longer able to do that. And so they're launching more of these kind of business email fraud attacks and phishing attacks, knowing that users are more likely to click on links and less likely to do the normal sorts of validations that they could do when they're in the office. The other thing to consider is we do a pretty good job generally as businesses of securing our offices. We've got making sure that anti-malware is running on your computer, we've got firewalls in place, all these sorts of controls. But home is, it's whatever 50 different employees have happened to set up in their home networks. And so there's a big issue and risk associated with keeping company data secure in these kind of distributed environments.
I saw a tutorial or a learning session that you did online about securing your home internet or securing your home for work from home. Can you maybe give us a few tips from that session? I think it could be quite useful for our audience.
Yeah, a lot of the principles of securing your home network are similar to the ones that you would use to secure your work network, but at a much smaller scale, right? So obvious things include making sure that your machines are patched and up to date, right? So that you take some time, maybe once a week, to run security updates on your laptop, on your router, on other devices that are connected to your network so that they're not a point of vulnerability. A second one is often we'll be running antivirus or anti-malware software on our work computers, but we're not necessarily thinking to do that on our home computers. But when they're all connected to the same network, they can present risks to each other. So making sure that we've got security across all of our different devices. Those are two obvious ones. The third one is actually most people for their home networks these days, it's all Wi-Fi, it's all wireless. And an easy thing to do is to create two separate wireless networks, one for maybe your Internet of Things devices or the things that are less likely to be secure and the things that are your critical devices, say your work machine, right? And so that way you've got some separation and one area of risk doesn't leak into the other. So those are three obvious things. And we actually make our securing your home network course for free for our customers and for others because we're really a big believer in this. So.
Okay. Let's talk about multi-factor authentication. I know that this is an initiative that is close, near and dear to your heart. And I've learned a lot about it through you and through the content that you have you've put on LinkedIn. And also I've been following your petition. So tell us about multi-factor authentication. Like in its basic form, what does it do and why is it so important?
Yeah, so normal authentication is typically like two things right? So it's your username and password. And if you know your username and password, you can break in or you can get into a site, right? So, it's a good basic first level of security, but if you happen to use that same username and password somewhere else and that site gets compromised, it can be used to compromise other sites where you happen to use those credentials. And I can often guess those things again and again. And so single factor authentication has got some limitations and accounts are being compromised all the time. Multi-factor authentication combines two factors. So typically something you know with something you have, right? So if you think about like your traditional bank card, you need to have your bank card and you have to have your PIN, right?
Mhm.
You have to know your PIN. So having your bank card alone doesn't get you into getting cash out of the machine. Having your PIN alone doesn't. You have to have the two of those things in combination. So it's not
Right.
two things I know, but two different types of things.
Mhm.
So the classic application of multi-factor authentication these days there's two of them. One of them is, in addition to your username and password, the site might send you a text message to your phone and you enter a code in order to authenticate. That's a weaker form of multi-factor, and it can be compromised by taking over your phone number and stuff like that. So there's a bit of a weakness there.
Right.
The other one is an app that runs on your phone and generates codes on a regular basis.
Right.
So I have to know my username and password, and I also have to have the device. It can't be compromised from a text message.
Okay.
So the really interesting thing about multi-factor is Google and Microsoft both independently have done studies on the effectiveness of adding multi-factor to protecting your accounts, and it increases the effectiveness by over 99%. So it reduces the likelihood of success of an attack to less than 1% compared to what it would be normally. And in security, we're a big believer. There's no such thing as a silver bullet, but multi-factor is as close as it comes to having a really, really strong impact. And it's effectively zero cost for the sites that support it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
as you know, my petition is all about, I wish the banks in Canada would support multi-factor authentication, especially on consumer accounts.
Absolutely.
I mean, if I can get multi-factor on my Facebook and my Twitter and, all these other sites, why can't I get it? So
yeah, it's interesting. So in following you and your, I almost want to say obsession about MFA, we have MFA enabled on all tools in the business. But my personal email, for instance, didn't have it until recently. My wife's personal email did not. And of course, a lot of personal things go through that Gmail account, right? So that's one thing.
I would say that your email account's even more important than your bank account.
Yeah.
Like,
fair enough.
Because all of your life flows through it, and especially in a work environment, like it's your life, but it's also your, your T1 forms and your HR records and all that stuff. And if I can compromise your email account's usually the account recovery for all these other accounts.
Yeah.
I'll basically get access to everything in your online world. And so multi-factor on your email account is like the most important thing you can do.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about financial data. Of course, a lot of our audience, our clients and their financial data is top of mind. What are you seeing in terms of the most common schemes today around financial data, and what are potentially some of the things that we can do to plug those holes?
Yeah. So by far the most common scheme that I see is some combination of email or transfer fraud. And so classically, if you haven't used multi-factor on your email, or maybe one of your suppliers or customers hasn't, one of these accounts will get compromised. And sometime in a chain of communications, the attacker will lurk in that account for weeks or months. A request for payment will come across, and new information will be inserted that will allow the financial transfer to be redirected to another destination, right? Say I'm exchanging information with you and we're talking, and the attacker is in my email account, and then you say, hey, by the way, it's time for you to pay your invoice. Here's our ACH, our account information, send the money to me. The attacker will swap that email out for another one with the actual legitimate, illegitimate account information and redirect the funds. And so if you don't detect that quickly, the money is then gone within hours, and the attackers have walked away with $100,000, for example. Right? And so those attacks are actually incredibly common, and it's kind of, I always like to use the kind of Willie Sutton quote. Willie Sutton was a famous bank robber back in the kind of Old West days, and people would ask him, why do you rob banks? And he's like, that's where the money is. And so these business email frauds are a really easy way for attackers to directly get money compared to a lot of other schemes that they have to go through.
Right.
And so there's a really easy way to help remove the risk of this attack. And it's not a security control specifically. And it's what I refer to as out of band alternate direction verification, right? So say, for example, you're sending me a communication that says, I've got new payment information, please put your money here, right? Instead of responding to that email or just trusting it, I'm going to pick up the phone and call a number that I have for you on file, not in that email. And I'm going to confirm that bank information is accurate. And so
Okay.
I've changed the channel of communication. So if the email is compromised, I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
They're changing the direction of the communication. And that simple 5-minute step of validation
Yeah.
will dramatically reduce the risk
Hmm.
of one of those email frauds being successful.
Hmm.
And I only need to do it like during initial account setup or during any sort of change in payment details. And it can
Okay.
really, really reduce the risk of that type of attack.
Okay. And let's say that I do think that I have been the victim of an attack of some sort. What do I do? Where do I go? Like, what's the first thing I should do?
Yeah, it depends on the type of attack, but generally, like, so if it's one of these business email frauds, like
Yeah.
contact your bank immediately and put
Okay.
stop on the payment and the transfer. The
Yeah.
banks, if they get early enough notice, can often prevent the money from being sent further offshore. They can recover the money before it's permanently lost.
Okay.
So if you can get to that bank within hours, then often they can stop and recover the money on your behalf. So that's
Okay.
the first one on the business email fraud.
Okay.
On just general security things, if you're unsure about something you've done, say you've clicked on something and you realize later that it might have been a phish or something
Mhm.
like that, the first thing you should do is let your IT or security professional in your organization know,
Okay.
or the security team if it happens to be Kobalt, and they can immediately like do an investigation, figure out if it's a problem. If it's a phishing email, they may want to notify the rest of the staff so nobody else clicks on it. Uh,
Hmm.
they can do an investigation to see if your laptop has been infected. They can reset your account password, that kind of stuff. So what we tend to do as humans is we go, oops, I did something wrong. I want to hide it, right? The opposite is actually the right thing to do. Let somebody know right away who can take action, investigate if it's a real problem, and address the problem.
Okay. Great. Any final tips for our audience in regards to what they can do to protect themselves, especially in this new era? And who knows when the end is? Looks like we'll be working, in some shape or form from home for the foreseeable future.
Yeah,
So, any final tips?
I think your closing comment about that is we don't know how long COVID is going to last.
Right.
And
Right.
so treating this as the new normal and properly preparing your organization, right? So taking the time to ensure that your users are going through online security awareness training so they're less
Mhm.
likely to fall victim to attacks
Yeah.
and they understand how to secure their home networks is like, it's a good investment of time.
Hmm.
It doesn't need to cost a lot and it'll dramatically reduce the risk to your organization. So
Great.
I would say awareness training in general is a really, really positive thing and has a huge impact on outcomes.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Michael. Uh, Why don't we shift gears now a little bit, and why don't you tell us a little bit about Kobalt and how Kobalt is helping small to mid-sized businesses and the clients that you serve?
Yeah. So prior to starting Cobalt, I had been in security for about 20 years.
Mhm.
So, I've a bit of gray hair. And most of the security problem in the large enterprise is a relatively solved problem. And what I mean by this is it's not the attackers are going away. It's not that attacks aren't being successful, but large enterprises can hire a team and buy technology and do all the things necessarily to properly defend themselves. And even if they have a security incident, it's probably not going to be business ending.
Mhm.
But when you look at small and mid-sized companies, they can't afford to hire a full-time security professional. They
Mhm.
don't understand how to select and implement the right technologies and put the right processes and policies in place. And so we built Cobalt to help bring the enterprise class capabilities down to the small and mid-sized businesses so they can benefit from improved security at price points and in ways that are accessible to them. Because unfortunately, in today's world, half of the attacks that exist in cybersecurity go after small and mid-sized companies because they know that they're soft targets. And so we're hoping and having great success helping organizations up their game in a cost-effective, fast way so they can focus on their core business
Right.
and addressing the needs of their customers.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. It's been great chatting with you today.
Likewise, and good luck with everything.
Thank you. You too.
Stay safe, stay secure.